Civilizations are not born out of desire alone. Every civilization we've heard of, we've studied about, we've read about, from the Roman Empire, the Greek civilization, men sat down to strategically imagine a civilization. What does that make us understand? When we talk about reimagining a city, I want us to know that, first of all, Benin is not just a city, we are a civilization that once was. Because when we look at what's a civilization talks about an organized society that has strong political, social, and cultural structures. And if we look at Benin, we had all of this. That's our kingdom. That's our story. Imagine a city that had walls of over 16,000 kilometers in recorded history. That was 4 times the walls of China. And those walls were not built to keep enemies away. They were built to channel ambition. To channel ambition inward, to tell the story of a people. And that's why I tell people, we must move from telling the Benin story as a history of relics alone, the people that had their artwork stolen. No, in reclaiming our story, that was something that happened at a point. We must tell the story of our warriors, of people who built the civilization. When we talk about reimagining, we are talking about moving away into telling our story, like I said, not as one that has relics and just a part of something that looked like it was lost. But we must tell a story of people who forged a civilization out of a forest. We know Benin was a rainforest, right? Benin was a forest. But through imagination, people came together and an empire came out of a forest. That was people who imagined. Moving from the time of our migration, Benin was made up of loose clans. But when vision came and there was an inspiration, they came together and formed an empire that conquered nations. An empire that conquered lands. An empire that built a story out of nothing. That's our story. That's our civilization. Because we must live here today knowing that we are not just a city. We are a civilization. A civilization has an identity. That's what we are talking about. That must not be lost. And that story is our uniqueness and is our strength. We cannot talk about Benin without talking about certain persons who helped build that civilization. I call those people, as we hear, I call them the old takers. Right? People like Oriaifo, who came at a time where there was a civil war and he ascended the throne. And what he did first was that he gave the land a name. And after that, he began to build. He built palaces. He built markets. He built structures of administration. He turned the city around, not by words only, not by desire, but he made moves in line with what he imagined. Benin today is a commercial powerhouse. Why? One man imagined a land and a city that could become that. And what does that tell us? Imagination is what helped us engineer our destiny as a people into the history of time. Imagination is what brought about what we see today. Benin did not come and emerge by a whisper. No, it came and emerged by an intentional move by people. That's our history and that's our story. We cannot talk about Benin without talking about women like Idia, who through strategy, Idia imagined a strategy at a time where the throne of her son was going to be lost. She imagined a strategy to reclaim his throne and make sure that throne was not lost. What does that tell me? Imagination bet strategy. And you see, the story of Idia tells me that the thing of imagination and reimagination is not gender-based. It talks about courage. It talks about a will. Every time I read the story again of Benin, because we are talking about reclaiming our story, there was a general in the 1897 pionation by the British, and his name was General Iwohimi. And you see, even though he knew that the land was gone, but he stood as the last point of deviance. And he knew that even though they will take us into captivity, let somebody stand so that it will be said that we fought. And that is why today we can lay claim and say certain things about Benin. And it makes me understand again that imagination, one of the first things about imagination is that it is a refusal to fade. A civilization that doesn't know its story, that cannot preserve its story, we echo and we fade. It will be turned to a land that once was and no longer is. That is why in the different facets of our lives as people of this land, we must know that we have a story to preserve. We have a story to keep. Finally, for someone who inspires me greatly as it pertains people of this land, we know Chief Igbinedion, right? He tells us a story of someone who can rise regardless. Not born to parents who were wealthy. Not coming from a family that was well known. But this man, through imagination, knew that from the red soils of this land, wings could fly. And Okada Air came about. We are ambitious people. That's our story. We are people who dare to do the impossible. We are people who do not sit comfortably for things to come to us. We are people who made our history. No wonder we had our history that the Europeans, check, you can ask AI. Benin was the first place the Europeans stepped on when we talk about this region of Africa. Benin was the first. Why? We had people who imagined greatness, that this land and our civilization had so much global clout that the world could not resist but come to know who are these people, what are they building. The art that we have today that is generating millions and billions in revenue, that was the imagination of people. That was the thought of people. And again, in our time, the land is begging to be reimagined. When I hear reimagine, I hear it as a cry and a call that the land is saying, reimagine me. The old takers have done their own. What are the new takers doing? We are the new takers. In business like Chife Sama. In innovation like Obaye Sige. In strategy and administration like Obaye Ware. In courage like Queen Idia. A new generation of people who will reimagine the land into its next phase of relevance, into its next phase of prosperity, into its next phase of commercialization. That sound is calling and is waiting for people who will answer. Finally, how do we do this? We must begin to come together. A land that is divided against itself can never stand. Before we became an empire, we were scattered clans. And before Benin could build an empire, those clans, they probably did not know themselves, but they came together to turn a forest to an empire. That was how the Benin Empire was built. Making us know that through imagination, we can turn chaos into legacy. We must begin to ignite imagination in the younger generation. I see a time where every school in Benin will become an imagination hub. What are we creating? We are a land of creators. We are a land of innovators. We see these artworks now. We must begin to blend technology with innovation. We must begin to tell our story. As I was preparing for this, in my mind I saw the Idia was telling her story. Aaron, we know Aaron, right? Aaron was telling his story. Technology is here. Recently, we organized a program, the NASA Space Apps Challenge, and it was amazing what the young people could do with technology and coding. Our arts, even though we don't have them, they may be stolen, but they can begin to tell the Benin story. That generations will come and they will be proud that they are part of that story. Collaboration is key. We must begin to come together. I may not have what you have, you may not have what I have, but when we come together, we can have what each other have and build something great. We must begin to come together, uniting in strength to push this civilization to the next point of its greatness. That is our story. I told somebody we must not remain an echo. When we begin to do this and reimagine, we can now become a voice in the 21st century. We had a voice that called Europe and the whole world to this land. We can raise a voice again in our time that we call the whole world to this land. Because Benin, just as it's a transit point, people come to this land. And again, if we reimagine, people can still come. But we must come together to build again. Maybe we are not building walls of clay, but we are building walls of a new civilization that champions its cause. Finally, I will end with this. We must reimagine a land not as it was alone, but as what it can be. Every day when we move out, ask yourself, what can Benin be? What can the land be? What can the city be? What can come out of the land? When we begin to reimagine like that, then a civilization will no longer be an echo, will no longer be a story, but it will be a reality. It's a call. The old takers have done their part. It's on the new takers to reimagine. Thank you.